When I saw this bowl made by Tom Lohman, and if you've ever seen any of Tom's work, he does some awesome work. Right away it sparked my interest. How would you do something like that? Well, Tom had 8 photos of different stages of construction, and that's what we're going to try to do with this bowl. And how Tom did it was he took one color in the middle and added corresponding colors to either side until he had a bulk of wood as wide as it is long. And then what he does is, after this is all glued together and varying widths, some's real narrow, some's fairly wide, and everything in between, then once this block of wood is glued together, he stands it on end and runs it through the bandsaw and makes boards out of this. Then what he does is he cuts, this is almost like the economy bowl, or a bowl out of a board, whatever you want to call it. He cuts different size rings out of the many different layers that he gets, stacks them together with a twist in each one until he has the bowl assembled. So the bowl that we're going to create, or I'm going to create, is going to be small. It's not going to be made out of exotic lumber because I've never done this before, and if I run across something that I didn't anticipate, at least I haven't wasted expensive lumber. So that's going to be the shape. It's only going to be about 8.5 inches in diameter. It's not going to be maybe 3.5, 4 inches tall. And this is the way this works. All the purple comes out of one board. All the green comes out of a different board. Mine's going to have 4 boards. And to see this a little clearer, if you can imagine now, this is one board. So this would be the first circle, this would be the second circle, and this would be the third, etc. And you do that for each one. Now the only problem is the way Tom does this, he runs that through the bandsaw. I believe his bowl was almost 12 inches. I have 2 bandsaws, but neither one can resaw anything greater than 6 inches. So I'm going to have to make mine in half circles. Now he made his in full circles, cut on the scroll saw, and I can't. I have a scroll saw, but there's no sense in using a scroll saw on half circles. He did it to keep all his straight. So now the width of each ring is determined by how much each ring increases in diameter as you go up the bowl. The increase in radius has got to be, or diameter, has got to be an even multiple of the width of this ring. So what I'm going to use is a 1 inch wide ring and a 1/4 inch overhang. So that means I'm going to need 4 boards. Tom only went, I think, 1/8 inch on his, but this is, and it's not going to be near as fancy as what his is, because I'm just going to use cheap wood. But this way we'll work out any problems we come across. We'll be on scrappy wood, and if everything works out all right, then we will create a good bowl. Another thing you have to take into consideration is the thickness of each ring, because if this bowl is going to be on a 45-degree angle, and by having 1 inch wide pieces, that's going to give us a theoretical wall thickness of 17/32. Now that's way too much, but I'm going to leave it go at that. So if everything works out right, I'll just have to cut off more wood. But if something that I didn't anticipate happens and I'm too thin, I can't fix that. But I can always trim off the extra wood. So And you have to take into consideration also that when you cut this at a 45-degree angle, even though these pieces are they're only going to be 1/4 of an inch thick, that actually the edge you see is actually going to be almost 3/8, and that is most likely too thick for a bowl with this style. So, but we're going to make it 1/4 and see how it looks, and any changes that need to be made, we'll make that before we actually make a good bowl. I always show you a picture of what I think the bowl is actually going to look like. Well, this is a representation of that, because I have no clue what it's going to look like. Another thing to take into consideration is as we rotate these pieces on each layer, we can't go by degrees, because 4 degrees in here is very small. As this gets bigger, 4 degrees gets much bigger. So what we're going to do, I'm going to put some colored pieces in there so that I can use and like offset it 1/2 inch or 1/4, whatever I decide on. And that's the method I'm going to use. Now I also made a screen capture of exactly how this spreadsheet works. I guess I'll show that next, and then we will get ready to start to construct this thing. To help create this style of bowl, I created this spreadsheet. The 3 things you have to put in: the width of each ring, how much you want the radius to increase with each ring. If you put 1/8 of an inch in here, each ring will be 1/4 of an inch in diameter larger than the ring before it. And the size, the outside diameter of the very first ring. So say we want the very first ring to have a 3-inch outside diameter, and we want a ring width of 1 inch, and this must be you be able to divide this into the ring width evenly. So say we want 0.2 inches. Say we want 0.2 inches here. This tells us we're going to need 5 rings, and this is going to be the outside diameter of each ring and the inside diameter of each ring, and it's color coded. So the number 1 here, number 1 here, number 1 here, and number 1 here will all come out of the same board. And as you see, there's 5 boards. But say we wanted 1/4 of an inch thick rings. We put in 0.25. This tells us we only need 4 boards. And of course, there's only 4 colors here. And again, like this ring, this ring, this ring, and this ring will all come out of the same board. Now, of course, this is set up to calculate up to 40 rings. You're not going to need that. If you only want a 12-inch bowl, you would have to stop here. In other words, or ring 12 would be 8.5 inches in diameter. So, and you can also go, if you want this to be, say, 3/4 of an inch, and you want each ring to be 1/8 of an inch, this tells you you're going to need 6 rings, and it divides this into 6 colors. So that'll be a big help. If the cameraman wouldn't have screwed up yesterday, I'm not going to take the blame. So what you would have saw is some of the boards, I ran these through the bandsaw to no particular width, and then I ran them through the thickness planer, take all the saw marks off. Some of the maple was long enough that I could get 2 pieces out of, and when this has a bad spot in it. When I cut this in half, I made sure that I marked them as a pair, and I glued them all together. And as the last piece, I glued this red piece in the middle. So now what we're ready to do is we're going to take this block and we're going to run it through the bandsaw this way, and we're going to make 4 boards out of this. And as we cut them off, we're going to have to mark them so we keep one with the other. Well, first we're going to draw the circles on. No, I guess we'll wait to do that later. So run these through the bandsaw and make our boards. Now I'm going to do something that Tom didn't. When you make a circle out of a square, you lose 21%. And if I decide to make one of these out of really good wood, I think I'm going to take that into consideration so I don't waste 21% of very expensive lumber. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this waste off before I start. Now Tom didn't do that because then that meant he would have to put a circle, resaw a circle, where mine's going to be flat. So I can trim this waste away and feed it through on the flat side and probably get away with it. So before I make the boards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all this waste off, and then we'll rip this into boards. Okay, I cut the 4 corners off, staying outside the line. Now we'll take these and run them through the bandsaw and make 4 boards. This is going to be the cuts we make on the first board, the second board, the third, and the final board. I'm not actually going to use this. This is just mainly to show you the cuts that's going to be made on each board. Try to show it to you all put together. Now hopefully you can see once it's all stacked, they're all stacked together. Each one's 1/4 inch apart. I don't have the centers lined up, but that's how the 12 rings will go. And these 2 or 3 pieces in the middle, they won't be used at all. Now I have arrows on the outside pointing toward the top, or what I'm considering to be the top. So we have to keep these oriented right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half first, and then we'll cut the halves into quarters. Here's our 4 boards. Now I'm going to have to tape these together so they don't move all over the place. And then using the numbers off this spreadsheet, just like on the paper, I'll draw all the circles and we'll cut them out on the bandsaw. Now taking all the numbers off the spreadsheet, we're going to draw the circles for all the number 1s here on the number 1 board, and then we'll do the number 2s on the second board, the 3s on the third board, and etc. So I'll draw these lines on here and then I'll show them to you. There's the 4 circles, or the 4 boards with the circles all marked. The ones with the black X in don't get used at all. So I have them taped together while I mark them. We'll take the tape off, and next we'll cut all these rings out. Inspector's checking my work. Okay, all the circles have been cut, and these 2 that look like the centers was chewed out by a rat, I would have had to put a thinner blade on the bandsaw, and for 2 circles I didn't want to go to that trouble. So now I've sanded off the rough fuzzies, but we have to take these and put these into full rings now. So I don't know if I'm going to do them one at a time. I mean, there are 2 or 3 at a time, any order that they go up the bowl, or rather just do all 12 at once and take it from there. I'll make up my mind and I'll show you when I have these glued together. Okay, I have all the half rings glued into whole rings, and if you notice, there's 14 rings instead of 12 like I said there was going to be. But what I did is I kept the ring that was smaller than the 3-inch base that I started out with, but I don't know if that's going to be strong enough to be the bottom piece of the bowl, if I can hold the bowl together. And the last waist ring, I glued it together just in case. I figured I might be able to use it at the top. If not, we'll throw it away, but at least it's there if we want to use it. So we'll leave this dry, and then the next thing we'll do is turn the base and start adding rings. Now, this is going to be the base of the bowl. Piece of walnut, small hole drilled in the middle. This is the waste block. It's cherry with a little peg sticking out of it. There's the base. It's been turned around. The diameter of that right now is 3 5/8. That's way bigger. And I usually leave these first couple of rings bigger than they should be to give me stability, and then at the end I turn this way down. But I'm not going to be able to do this on this, so we'll leave it for that way for now until we glue on at least the first ring. There's the bowl with just the pieces loosely stacked on top of one another. Give you some idea what the bowl's going to look like. I'd really like to start with that 2.5 inch circle, but I did a little calculating, and if I use the 2.5 inch circle, that gives me 4.9 square inches of contact to the base. And if I go to 3, it goes from 4.9 to 7.0. That's 2 square inches more contact area. So I'll think about this before I actually glue the piece on, and I'll let you know what I decide. Okay, I've made my decision. This should have been a 2.5 inch piece. But as you can see on this piece, because I figured I wasn't going to use it, I stayed way to the inside of the line. So this isn't 2.5 inches, it's barely 2 1/4, just a shade under 2 1/4. So that would take my surface area down to 3.97 inches, which is 44% smaller than this. So I'm not going to go with the 2 1/4 inch piece. We're going to start with the 3 inch disc like originally planned, and we'll take it from there. Here's something that we must pay attention to when we're creating a bowl like this. The grain in this base is running in this direction. The grain in the first row, it all runs this direction. What we do not want to do is get this at a 90-degree angle to this. We want to keep the grain going in the same direction, because this wood is going to expand and contract in this direction, and we don't want one piece to fight the other one. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. So I'll put some marks on here and we'll glue on the first piece. Okay, now that's glued fast, we're going to have to trim this all away so I can actually see to line these up. So I'll turn this in and turn a big chunk of this away. The more I look at this, 1/4 inch is just a little too thick. So I turned this down. I marked it, I think it's 0.205. So we're going to stick to that measurement for the rest of the rings. So it's all sanded off. We'll add the next piece. These pieces are much too thin to try and hold with your fingers and run them on my sanding wheel. So I just put a little double stick tape on there and tape it fast to a waste block. Let me show you what I come up with to help with the alignment. Because this cave is so small here and we got all this mass up above it, it's going to be very hard to keep that aligned. And once the glue starts to squeeze out, we're not going to be able to really see our alignment marks real well. So, like I always do, I put these 4 blocks on here to help it, and I put blocks on here. Now all I have to do is put this down between the blocks and rotate clockwise until they mesh. That right there stops it from moving. So that's what we're going to use, at least until these rings start getting a little bit bigger. There's the second row on. First row was 0.205. This is 0.210. I'm not going to quibble about 5 1/1000ths of an inch. The third ring is glued into place. This is ring number 5. Draw a pencil mark all over this. I have it stuck fast to a waste block with double face tape. Start the center. marks all gone. It must be flat. That's 8 rows glued together. And those little sticks that I'm using are popsicle sticks. I'm going to make a 24-piece ring for the top of the bowl. I have a different table saw here. So how I'm going to work this is this is a 1/4 bolt threaded into a T-nut. So being that way, every time I turn this one flat, I should be 8/1000ths of an inch. So this is the first time I tried this. So we're going to cut the pieces for the top ring and glue them together. There's the 24-piece ring all cut out. Has to be glued together yet. If I'd have made the bowl a little bit smaller, I could have used this walnut ring I already had cut out. But, so we'll glue this together and we'll attach it to the bowl. I did not use that multicolored 13th ring. The 13th ring is solid walnut. So we'll leave that dry till tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll try and turn it. Now the bowl's all been put together. All left to do, turn it. First thing we're going to do is turn this surface flat. And the best tool to use for that, this is I think it's 1.5 inch scraper. Now with the David Ellsworth gouge, freshly sharpened, clean up the inside. Uh-oh. The inside of the bowl has been turned and I sanded it down to 400. And once we finish the outside of the bowl, I'll take that on down to 600. I'll sand it down to 600, 800, maybe 12. I don't know. I'll show you what the outside of the bowl still looks like. That's what the outside of the bowl looks like. So now I'm going to cut a plug to put on a faceplate so I can stick it in here. I'll show you. So I can hold this real solid as I turn this, because we're going to turn this super thin. Now I need to find out what this angle is. Now we'll match that to the plug we're going to cut for in here. We have matched that angle pretty close, so we'll put that in to hold that, use that to hold the top of the bowl. Now that it's securely held in place, I'll start turning here and I'll turn down the bowl. Once we get all the corners knocked off, and we'll have to check for thickness the whole way down, but we'll work from the top to the bottom. Again, with my Ellsworth gouge, I'll hold it with the open flute almost pointing directly toward the bowl. We'll continue this until we get all the corners knocked off. Okay, the bowl's been sanded to 800 grit, inside and out. That's the inside. I'll show you the outside. There's the outside of the bowl. Now the only part I really don't care for is this little extra flare here at the bottom. But this is already down to just a hair under 1 7/8. This is where it'll be cut off, right here. Because I left the wall so thick, then I cut the majority off the outside, which takes this closer to the center. And if I would have kept on going perfectly straight, I would have probably only had a 1-inch base. That's a little too small. So I left myself about 1/8 of an inch here to finish the bottom. So that should give me approximately a 2-inch base. And that's about as small as I like to go. That's the first coat of sanding sealer. So we'll leave that dry till tomorrow, sand it, and put another 2 coats on, and then I imagine I'll put on wipe-on polyurethane. I won't show much now until we go to cut the base off. That's 2 coats of sanding sealer and 2 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. Now we'll hold this with my plug until we cut the base away. There's the bowl. It's complete. It's 8 3/4 inches at the top, just a shade under 2 inches at the base. 3 1/4 inches tall. It has 473 pieces in it. In the wood is maple, oak, walnut, bloodwood, padauk, cherry, and purple heart. One other thing, I've got 3 or 4 emails that I cannot reply to. If you sent me an email asking a question and I did not reply, then for some reason, I cannot reply to those emails. If you didn't leave or misspelled your return email address, it won't. I can't reply to it. So I answer all emails that I get. It may take several days, but I answer each and every one. And even if you ask me a question I don't know, you'll get an answer saying I don't know. So once again, I'd like to thank you for watching my video.